Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and once again, I am over the moon to be sharing today's conversation. I feel like I say that every week, but I hope that you all know that it's very genuine. I am sharing my conversation with Miss Alma Katsu. She is the author of Fiend. She also had a short story that just came out in Stephen King's The Stand anthology that was edited by Brian King and Chris Golden last month. It is a lovely story. I love it so very, very much. We will be discussing the novel Fiend and that story in this conversation. I admire Alma so much. I think that she's had the coolest career. She's just such an admirable woman, and I look up to her immensely. So getting the chance to chat with her was just absolutely everything. I hope that you all enjoy it, and I'll talk to you guys after. Hi, Alma. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am thrilled to be talking to you. I feel like you are one of the most prominent voices in, like the female world of horror fiction, and I'm really, really delighted that I've gotten the chance to talk to you today. You have a book coming out called Fiend on September 16th, and I read it and I loved it, and you've also had some other cool stuff going on this year, so I'm just thrilled to be able to chat about all of it with you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. That is so nice of you to say. I certainly don't feel like any prominent statesperson in the world of horror. I feel like I've been away for a little while, and it's amazing how fast things move. Horror is such a hot genre right now. It's just bubbling. So many books out this fall, for instance. I'm surprised you have any time to do a podcast with all the reading you must do.
This is very true. Time does not seem to be real, but hey, we make it work. We make it work. In particular, you had an essay in Why I Love Horror as well, and that was an essay that I really, really related to. In addition, you just had a short story that came out in The End of the World as We Know It anthology, and I really, really enjoyed that one as well. So those are the two pieces, in addition to Fiend, that have really stuck out in my reading this year. I've gotten to read three things from you, which is kind of a high number. Like that's a lot.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing that piece for Becky Stratford's book, which is such an engaging book. I mean, first of all, I think it comes out shortly after or shortly before mine. We're doing one event together. I've known Becky for several years now, and I just admire her so much. She
Mhm.
really is such a great spokesperson for horror, and as a librarian, she's got this great perspective, on the genre as a whole and its place in literature as a whole. So it was quite rewarding to be asked to write for her, but I have sort of a unique perspective on things because of my background. Just this morning, I was working on a talk I'm going to give at the Monster Symposium at the University of California, Santa Cruz, that draws on the same thing. I can't wait to see what the academics think about it. But yeah, because I was an intelligence analyst for many, many years, and a good part of that was spent working on genocides and mass atrocities. And that really gives you, at least it did to me, a different mindset on horror and what is horror and who is a monster.
Yeah, I really cannot relate more. I have done my time working as an analyst. I'd worked in digital forensics for about 2 years. We did it was an internet crimes unit, so saw a lot of interesting things. Witnessed a lot of interesting things and did a lot of interesting work with that, which I know is not quite the same as mass crimes, but yeah, it's just crazy how that worldview kind of flips when you consume this kind of material, and then you have the real world practical side of it that you see.
Yeah, I'd want to pick your brain sometime. So for a long time, I worked at NSA, National
Yeah.
Security Agency. We did a lot of stuff with forensics. Yeah. So yeah, I might have to pick your brain sometime and find out what the modern approach is, because
Oh
this was
yeah.
a long time ago. But yeah, cool.
No,
Well,
that
thank
would that would be a very long conversation, I think. That would probably run over this allotted hour, so we can reschedule that one for another
you.
time.
Okay, sounds
But
good.
yeah, and of course, I want to focus on you and your book, and in particular, Fiend. So if people have not heard of Fiend yet, if you want to introduce the book, the plot, just kind of those general things, we'll start from there, and also kind of talk about what inspired the story for you.
Sure. So the very short description I give is succession but horror. But that doesn't really do it justice. But it's the story of a super wealthy family, one of the wealthiest families in the world. And they've had this amazing run of luck for 1,000 years, very fairy tale kind of number of years, 1,000 years of good fortune. And their competitors are a little hard pressed to explain how this has come about. But there is this rumor that maybe there's some sort of special power that they have on their side, someone who is something or someone who's protecting them and makes all of their troubles go away. But we don't believe in that sort of thing, right? This is the 21st century. That can't be right. But the story really is looking at this family and in particular the children. The middle child, who happens to be a daughter, is really of the opinion that she is the right person to take over, not only as the CEO of the business, but as the head of the clan, which is a very important thing. But of course, her brother, who is the eldest and the only male heir, is sort of earmarked for that. And she thinks he is not the right temperament. So she's trying to figure out, she has made it her goal to unseat him and become the favorite to lead the family. And that's when all the trouble starts. So for me, there are a lot of influences for this story, not just Succession, which I can say when I first started watching it, when it first came out, I didn't like it and I stopped.
No.
I thought the people were just so awful. And who wants to watch people like this? But I came back to it in the last year, and I was so struck at how good the writing was that I went back and I watched the whole thing. And as a writer, I learned a lot from that series. But really, the inspiration for the bad families and evil dynasties were the Sacklers and the opioid. I hate to say crisis. That was the word that popped in my head because it was a totally man-made,
Yeah.
fabricated, manipulated crisis for the benefit of one family. And it made me wonder, we see so much of that these days. We see so much too of this idolization of the rich that the only people worth our attention seem to be super wealthy people, whether it's TVs or movies or social media, that if you're not rich, you pretend to be rich. And it's to the point where people don't care how someone else got rich. And, what are we worshiping at this point in our lives? And so I wanted to write a story to maybe try to wake people up and make them question it. But then on the other hand, it's also very much a story of a family. And, I don't believe that anybody is born evil. I believe that it's the influences in your life that train you to think that these bad choices are okay. And that's what I set out to show in this book. We see the kids and where they are now as adults, but we also see them as children and we see the things that happen to them that made them act the way they do to protect themselves, to protect their really fucked up family, because that's what we do. That's how we're trained. So those are the two main things going in the story.
Yeah, I mean, when I read the synopsis for the book, I obviously thought Succession because I watched that show, and much like you, I had the same reaction of, God, these people are terrible. I don't know if I can endure however many hour-long episodes of just like following these miserable people. But like you said, it's kind of like a car wreck. You can't quite look away because it's going to end poorly. It's not going to end in sunshine and rainbows for these people. So what I do love about what you were able to accomplish with Fiend is that Succession's great and all, but I find it's very subtle and muted in its atrocity, right? Like you have to pick up on the microaggressions, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some loud shouting matches and some really strange things that happen, but for the most part, it's so rooted obviously in reality. I think a lot of to me, it almost read as social horror, right? Like this is where we're at. This is what we're admiring, like you said, but we're not going for it. We're not going all the way there. And Fiend did. And I appreciated that a lot. Did you feel like a similar way for just like kind of diving in and exploring all that is so wrong with this dynamic?
I kind of feel like we could have even gone deeper,
Yeah.
because one of the main conceits of the story is we don't know if there really is something else going on there. For the family, it's a rumor. The only people who know the innermost secrets of the family are the mother and the father, Zeph and Olga, and Darden, the son. And he is, indoctrinated to the secrets once it's solidified that he's going to be the heir. But for everyone else, it's just sort of rumor and innuendo. And it's the kind of thing that it's hard to have proof of, right? What constitutes proof? So, but it also gives you plausible deniability, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you hit on a point that is part of my frustration with the current moment that we're in, is that we make it so easy for people to deny when
Mm.
bad things are happening, and specifically to say, you're causing these bad things to happen. What seems obvious, we still put enough holes in the Swiss cheese so that people can say, oh, well, I didn't really think he did that. I didn't really, think he lied or whatever. And they had to sustain that in succession, partly because it was so closely aligned with the Murdochs
Yes.
and what they did to the news media. It is pretty well known, but it's still fairly subtle. It's not like the Murdochs went around stabbing people with knives, for instance. But here I could say, um, is it possible that they're responsible for real atrocities? For many people dying, for people dying in horrible way, unexplainable ways, um, and more run-of-the-mill atrocities like child labor and children getting killed in factories because nobody cares about safety conditions and things like that we all know about, but it's still kind of easy to sort of push out of our minds.
Yeah, if it's not in front of them, it's out of sight, out of mind. They can neglect it. It's not as forceful. And my favorite thing that you just said about, like poking enough holes in the Swiss cheese. I mean, they did it in succession with the underline or the strike through, and that's that plausible deniability of, oh, we don't really know what he meant. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it carries on, into this way. And what I really love about horror is that, in general, is it's pretty unflinching. So you're gonna get some some answers about where some things lie, and I just really like that you really leaned into that with this story. And so also I kind of want to talk about why we find this so interesting because like we said, these people are terrible, right? These characters are not the best characters. We hear the things that Zeph has done to his children and we're like, gosh, that's horrible, but we can't stop reading and we kind of want to understand why. And so I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts about what it is on understanding these characters that can be really harsh or really cruel and us wanting to read more about them.
You just like tapped into one of my secret fears.
Oh
Because
no.
for so long, especially for female writers, right? Readers tended to want to see likable characters. And I think women might have been judged a little more harshly for the kinds of characters they wrote, as opposed to what the story was actually about. But I feel like the tide is turning a little bit between, all of the psychological suspense and domestic suspense, where you have more unlikable characters, or at least characters that don't try so hard to be likable. You see it on television. You see it in shows like Succession. And I just crossed my fingers and thought, well, maybe readers are willing to take that jump if the story's interesting enough and complex enough. Like you said, it's like a car crash, but you can't look away from it. These people are terrible, but you want to find out what's going on, why they are the way they are, if there really is something sinister at the heart of everything, or is it just that they're so gosh darn evil that they do this and they pretend there's something at the heart of it. Um, I tend to write really complex, multi-layered stories. It's just the way I think. I think it has to do with the decades of being an intelligence analyst where we deal with complex issues and we have to understand all the components and the relationship of those components to one another. I just see complex issues in their totality. And if you like that kind of story, you'll like my writing. If you don't, if you want a more simple through line, um, but I think it's that layering that makes the story readable.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you about kind of the harshness that women or, have been judged about their unlikable characters in the past. And it does feel to me like there has been a change in attitude. I hope,
Thank
that
God.
continues. Yeah, I hope that continues. And that's been like one of my biggest things with, like what I've been drawn to in reading is like I want to read about the unlikable character. I want to read about and like how far are they going to go? Because to me, it's very honest reading. To me, I don't really care for whenever we're having to kind of like shift through the bullshit, like if we're like, oh, is this a farce? Is this a oh? But whenever you have a character, like for instance, like Maris in this story, the middle child, the one who is wanting to take all, we're seeing, she thinks of herself in one regard, so it's kind of like an unreliable perspective that we're getting, but we're peeling back the layers of the onion and we're like, oh, this is what's really going on. This is the heart of the matter. And I don't think she ever once really tried to be deceitful to us in her perception of things. And we just had to spend enough time with her, right? And I really, really enjoyed that because I think that there's something about earnesty and honesty in horror that goes a long way for me, whether people are likable or not. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does, and I'm really glad to hear that because, I mean, I'm going to say this, and of course my mind's blanking, so I can't really like put a finger on an example. But some of the stories I've enjoyed most lately are written by are written by women, and
hmm
they do embrace what it means to be a woman and all your messiness. And you don't have to pretend to be Cinderella, thanking the mice for helping you, clean your stepsister's shoes or whatever, right? That you allow yourself to be upset that you're being treated a certain way. Um, I think most women can probably identify with being in the position where you have to pretend so much and just the freedom of being able to let that out. Now with Maris, it there's another aspect to it, and that, she's rich and
hmm
spoiled and she's never had to hide her feelings. She's never had to pretend. She doesn't, I mean, the thing about her is she is the of the three children, she is the one who is most like her father, the power broker, and unapologetic for it. All she wants is for her father to love her and to show that love for her, which she never gets. Zeph has other things on his mind, but and so she's never had to pretend. She is just very direct and honest with what she wants. And some people aren't going to like that. They're going to think, well, only a bitch is like that. Not in our hearts of hearts.
Well, I think too, and this is something that you just mentioned, being able to not have to kind of cower to or like being thankful for like the general way that people should be treated. Like that whole kind of, through line of being authentically, a woman and being honest about why we are the way we are, I think has kind of really allowed for those stories to be told. And then, obviously for Maris, there's a lot more, like you said, there's a lot more layers to it with her wealth, her position, her goals, the way that she was raised. But I think what's really interesting, if we want to step away for a moment or maybe we can lean into it with the gender stuff, is with the sibling dynamics, right? So we have the eldest boy, right, Darden, who's supposed to be taking the throne, and he's kind of an interesting character to me because he's a lot more complex than I was anticipating. And then, we have Maris, and there's the youngest daughter, Nora, who is really just kind of the black sheep of the family. And so I wanted to give you the space to talk about them, their characteristics, and how you landed on who was going to be who within the family, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, things changed around a little bit. This story was different for me too, and then it sort of came to me whole.
hmm
And I started writing it. But the big difference is that Maris was um, a nicer person in the original version. Like things, but it was problematic because when you have a protagonist that's reactive, that things
hmm
happen to, it really can drag the story down. I needed her to be more dynamic, which means she needed to want something and want it pretty badly. So her character changed. But all three of the children change over time. And that's why I have the flashbacks. So you can see how they started, what influenced them to change them into what they are today. So Darden, well, one thing I'll say is there is a lot of gender issues in this. There is more of me in this book. I do not come from a wealthy family, far from it. but a lot of those issues were in my family growing up. And I am much older than most of your listeners probably. And I grew up in in a time where males were openly favored in
Hmm.
family, right? So I hope my brother doesn't listen to this. I only have one brother. Um, I was obviously the smartest kid in the family, but he was the only one that had a college fund, right?
Hmm.
The 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 boy has to, make something of himself, and we just have to sort of figure out our way in the world. And growing up, knowing that you're the openly spoken second class citizen, can't help but have an effect on your brain. And so I knew there was going to be this kind of tension that you have Maris, who's much more capable, who's obviously getting passed over and is only valued for her uterus at this point. And, Darden is a normal, rich, bratty kid. He starts out spoiled, but something changes him and makes him want to be a better person. And while I didn't spell it out, that something is when he learns the family secret and
Yeah.
sees what they're really lashed up to.
Yeah, I think that that was a really interesting dynamic that you introduced. And being from the South, I feel like that's still a thing down here about
Oh,
the
is it?
men the men still sometimes getting a little bit more preferential treatment. But I think the thing you had a really interesting scene, and I don't think that us talking about it will be a spoiler. But a certain event unfolds, and Maris gets the opportunity to be interviewed for like a major media source, and she thinks that she knows what she's getting into, and she sits down. It's a female reporter, and then as the interview goes on, it's a really revealing interview about I think a lot. I think about the state of the world, about how cutthroat things can be, about maybe sometimes mock feminism, about trying to like show fake camaraderie to try and like work an angle. And we learn a lot about Maris too in this process because we get a lot of internal reaction from her as she's being asked these questions. And I kind of wanted to open it up to you to just talk about that scene because I think it was my favorite scene in the book, just seeing it all play out. It was one of the most intense ones for me, like no blood or guts, but man, it just psychologically it was really, really intense.
Well, thank you. It's funny. I get this reaction from women readers. Like that chapter is it just impactful for them. Um, And it's so funny. Well, so until very recently, I was also a technology futurist. So I actually read the Financial Times a lot and Business Insider and that sort of thing. So I guess I could sort of project what an interview would probably go like. But also, towards the end of my career in government, I was a manager and I got kind of high up and you learn a lot of lessons. Kind of like Maris, except I was old and she's young. She was never trained for that position that she got into as CEO, right? So she goes from having a not serious position in her father's company to suddenly being, in the top seat and being on the hot seat. And she doesn't know how to handle all of the slights that are going to be thrown at her. And that's kind of how it was for me, that you're suddenly just in this no-win situation. If you're competent, you're cold or you don't have a personal side. If you're too personal, then, you're just a sloppy, mama figure or something like that. It's funny, the interview I just did had me read a paragraph from that chapter that ends with her being advised by the head of corporate communications, you have to be firm and in control, but not controlling, because, then you're seen as a bitch. And that's exactly how it is. I have to be in control, but not controlling. You're put in an impossible situation. And the same way the kids are put in an impossible situation in their family. They're given direction, remember, it's always family first. It's always business first. Well, those two things are diametrically opposed. You can't always make both of them first. And yet that's the environment she was raised in, that they were going to have unrealistic expectations of her. She was never going to be able to win.
Yeah. It I resonate with that so much because I feel like being any kind of professional in today's day and age kind of warrants that reaction out of you as a woman of like, oh, you need to be poised, you need to be put together, but you can't come on, like all of the you can't, all that good stuff. And so it was somewhat relatable to a degree. Obviously, I'm not a CEO of this huge company, but that feeling of like there is no winning in this. Like what does a winning even feel like? Is there a win? Like what is the answer to that? Is there one? It felt
Why do they set
very,
up boxes like that
yeah.
where to make you fail? Who does that benefit other than to make some person, maybe male, feel better about themselves, right? Like, and as a government official, it was just so frustrating. Why? Why are you doing this? It's so destructive. We could be spending this energy moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah. It feels like a waste of resources at the end of the day, I guess, and to have the attention, spotlighted there. But I think that that's another thing that you wrote really well is like this corporate nature, this like very kind of like cold and cutthroat, everything's a crisis. And quite frankly, in this story, it really is a crisis. But I think that that atmosphere is very unique to like I don't know that I've read a whole lot of horror that is like business focus or like this corporate focus, but it's really terrifying because it can be sterile, it can be calculating, it can be all these different things. So I was kind of curious what it was like I mean, and I know that you have the government experience that you kind of relate to, but what that felt like writing in this atmosphere in this playground that's maybe not as conventional as other horror set pieces, if that makes sense.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the few stories that I can think of that had that sort of corporate aspect to it didn't go there. It
Yeah.
stayed in the character's personal space and didn't show the horrors that happen to all of us in the workplace. And I think that's why shows like Severance are so popular because
Yes.
we can all relate to this mystifying environment that we have to give so much of our lives to and get so little from in return. It was really fun to write because I got to get out a lot of the stuff that was left inside me after that government career. Um, yeah, I think there should be more of it.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it.
Okay, let's do another one then.
I was about to say we'll spearhead the movement. I have to imagine that it's pretty cathartic to like get it out, like all of the frustration, all of the things that feel so heavy that are like so small in a workplace, but mean so much to you whenever you're like going home at the end of the day. I feel like that's what makes the atmosphere the way that it is.
Well, I gotta say that chapter with the interview with the
Hmm.
Financial Times reporter literally just came out in one pass. And
Yeah.
after I wrote it, I was like, man, that stuff had been living in my head. I mean, it was just ready to come out.
Yeah, it had been writing it go on paper for sure. And I kind of want to shift gears with my next question here, and by no means do I want to spoil anything, but if we can maybe talk loosely about the rumor of this family secret or whatever nefarious nature, is possibly may or may not be going on with this family. Kind of what inspired the the thoughts around that, the themes around that. Because whenever I was reading it, I picked up on themes of like anger, retribution, the emotions that we're forced to shove down in the day-to-day kind of like life, like going to work, and then they inevitably come out in other ways, like things. Those are the things that I picked up on, and so I was curious where that started for you.
Well, there had to be a horror element. Someone
Yeah,
asked me, like, if you took that out, would it still be a horror story? Probably,
I would
but
say
this
so.
this made it more squarely in the horror camp. But also because to me, like that, one of the central questions of the book is every day we see people doing horrible things and they're rich, and so they think they can get away with it. But we know they're doing it, right? And they may say, "Oh, I'm not doing it," but we know they're doing it, and we let them get away with it. What would it take to wake people up and so that they would say you are evil? Does the actual effing devil have to leap up behind that person? Fire and brimstone? Do we have to, does it have to go to that Old Testament level for us to be able to admit, maybe that person's not very nice. That's where the idea came from, actually. And the not knowing is that plausible deniability, right? That, oh, I'm not doing anything bad. How can you even suspect me, right? But they
Yeah.
know they're doing
Oh yeah.
something bad.
100%. And I think it's such a you really examined that conundrum really interestingly with Nora. And I kind of want to hear a little bit more about her character because she interests me to no end, especially with her arc. And obviously we're not going to say how the story ends, but she's a character that has been living in my mind since I've finished the book.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Good for Nora. She evolved quite a bit over the writing, but I liked having a character that was messy in all the human ways you would be. I mean, if you were richer than anybody could measure, wouldn't you be indulgent? Wouldn't you, buy drugs and do fun things and hang out with fun but dangerous people, things like that. And she does it, but she also has a good side. And in this family, having a good side is like just putting a big target on your back. So she becomes clever about how she handles that. Not always clever. She's very young. Um, but yeah, she was a fun character, right? And very honest.
Yeah. I really
What did you like about her? What is so intriguing about her to you?
yeah, I think one she there were like a few things that she just went for and she did. And I was like, "You know what? Right on." Like she kind of, she kind of put her money where her mouth was at, like when maybe some like not actually consequential things, but like within the family, she was willing to, kind of put her money where her mouth was. And in the end, I, I don't want to say too much, but just her past and what was revealed about her past and how she has decided to move forward in life with what we learned about her as a child was really, really intriguing to me. And I would love to like I don't know. I feel like I want more of her story a little bit to see like how that has like sat with her in her teen years and her, a little bit like I know she's in her early 20s, but like, young adulthood and things like that. I mean, she's still a young adult, but it's just such an interesting way that her characterism and her altruism of like wanting to use money for like good causes and to put us the stop to the child workers and wherever their company's situated at and like all those things like she's wanting to be the change and I guess my question is I'm like is she really gonna do it is she really gonna if she was like given full on the opportunity to do whatever she wanted would she really do it and I would like to think that she would but I don't she's complex in that way and so I don't know that's why she sticks with me.
I like to think she would too. I mean, one interesting thing to me, and I think one of the things that makes her most honest is, we I think we associate that sort of altruism and love of people doing good and sort of embrace of justice with the young.
Yeah.
And as you get older, it's easier for you to, rationalize and okay things that end up being self-enriching and push down or deny the negative aspects. So she's very true to herself. She's young. She feels these things deeply. I'd like to think that she continues in her way, but maybe you'll get the chance to find out because, it's been optioned for TV. And so we've been talking about like what the 3-season arc would look like. So it
Yeah.
would go beyond where the book ends.
Well, that would be incredible. I really love what the groundwork that was the foundation laid for her, and then just to see like, oh, whenever rubber meets the road, what would this really look like for her?
Yeah.
She's interesting for me in that way, especially because she's also a woman and she's the youngest of this group, and we really kind of saw how it played out for Darden and for Maris. But there's a little bit more room, I think, for her to breathe because of the way that she is. And she kind of removed herself from the family. They didn't really want anything to do with her because she was so, well, what you're doing is bad. She was calling them out on it. So they're like, oh, well, we'll shove you aside.
Right. She
Um,
was not putting the family first. She wasn't
yeah.
putting the business first. She was putting truth and goodness first.
Yeah.
That's not a
Decency.
family value here. But Yeah, she had to be a little bit of a mystery in order
Hmm.
for the story to work. But as you said, we pull the curtain back a little bit, and you see that, she was given a pretty harsh truth early in her life that could have just made her a wreck, let her
Yep.
be completely indulgent and unhinged. But I don't want to give away
That's
too much, but it doesn't
yeah.
get quite that far. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that we're on the same wavelength with her and, what could have been and versus what's next for her. And so to kind of just like settle up on our discussion of Fiend, how did you land on the conclusion of the story? I know that you've talked about how like, for instance, your interview scene kind of came out in one pass, but like the siblings may have, their development had moved around a little bit whenever you were writing, but was your conclusion always the same or did that undergo some revisions as well?
No, I don't know if it was the exact scene that it ends on,
Hmm.
but it was in that direction because I too have this oversized sense of justice. And I just hate it when evil people prevail. Really hate it.
I look, hey, I get it. I'm with you. So
Good.
yeah, so I really enjoyed that ending. It felt really right for the story. It felt, and I like quite frankly, your storytelling with Fiend was very sharp and to the point and like it matched the atmosphere of the story. Like it's one of the coolest things that I think that I've found is that your storytelling matched the atmosphere and that it was like all just flowing and then I was like really kind of sad when I got to the end because I was like, oh, I kind of want to read more of that. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
thank
there's a little
you.
more.
I
But no,
really appreciate your enthusiasm for the book and that it seemed to grab you in such a way. That's what I'm hoping for with the story that, even though it may not be what readers are expecting, that they'll still just, find themselves. It was written to sort of grab you by the hand and pull you along
oh,
so
it
that,
does.
you kind of can't even grasp everything that's going by you until you get to the end and then it'll all like hit you.
Yeah, no, I think that that happened, and I was ready for it. I was seated and ready for the ride. But I do want to shift gears a little bit because I really, really just I love the short story that you wrote for the Stand anthology, The End of the World as We Know It.
Oh,
And so I
you.
want to have a little bit of space to talk about it. It's called Make Your Own Way. I believe it's the last story that's in the first section of the book, like right before it shifts to part two. Can you just speak a little bit about it? Like what inspired that story, what the whole process was like? I mean, I want to hear all about it, honestly.
Sure. Well, Chris and Brian contacted me and asked if I would like to contribute a story to the anthology. And I said, sure, I'd love to, but I never read The Stand. And it's really been sort of a joke because, of course, everything we do, all the promotion for it, everybody talks about how The Stand was, this seminal book in their lives and changed them forever. And, readers have been coming up to me, including my friends, telling me how much it meant to them. And I just feel like a phony. But I read other Stephen King books, just not that one. Um, so that's the first thing. I had to kind of get over that, and also knowing that every writer was going to do their best for Uncle Stevie. You couldn't be a slack about it. You couldn't just phone it in. Um, I read the unabridged version like
Hmm.
as fast as I could, like literally 4,000 pages on my iPhone.
Yeah.
So I had kind of channeled Stephen King pretty much at that point. And then I wrote the story. And I knew I wanted to write a story about the the fact that women were going to be faced with having a lot of strange men coming into their lives and how do you deal with it,
Yeah.
right? And how do you learn to trust your judgment? How do you learn to trust yourself? And this was what, about 3 years ago? So I had been living where I live now for about 2 years. I live on a mountain in West Virginia. It is as rural and remote as you can imagine. We are surrounded by cattle farms and poultry farms. Where I live is a bunch of weekend Washingtonians. They come up for the weekend in their vacation homes or whatever. But I wanted to write a story that reflected the area that I live in. I
Hmm.
am surrounded by people I don't always agree with politically, but I respect very much as people. They're hardworking,
Yeah.
they're honest. The women are tough as nails, but also very nice and soft in their own way. And they all know how to shoot a gun. So I want to write a story about one of them. And that's what I did, about a young girl whose whole family dies, and she decides to stay on the family farm because her horse is still alive. And she doesn't know it, but it's the last horse on Earth because all the other horses have been wiped out. But she figures there's a reason for it. And then one day, a stranger, a young man, comes up the road to her house. And she handles it very smartly, I think. But the inevitable happens and they become drawn to each other. And then she realizes that maybe all of the trepidation she's been feeling, there's a reason for them.
Yeah. I really appreciated the grit that was in that story. There was a lot of, that toughness that you speak about these people having. I felt like that really came through. Um, and I think it just felt like a little bit, I read The Stand for the first time this past Christmas going
Oh,
into the new year because I knew that the anthology was coming out. So I was like, oh, I need to get ready because I hadn't read it yet.
thank
Um,
you for not making me be alone.
oh my God, no. It's an intimidating book. It's huge. And the way that people talk about it too, it's a really hard thing, I think, to kind of get on board with reading it because of one, its size, and two, the cultural impact that it's had. It's just massive. Um, so anyway, I read it and I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, but I felt like the story that you told was like the story that was kind of like missing in there was that true like feminine, like don't get me wrong, I love Franny. I love, like Nadine, as complicated as she is, like I love all of the women in the stand for their different reasons, but I really appreciated the way that you told that story because it felt like I was kind of like that girl and I was like, oh, so
No.
that's who I am in the stand. You know what I mean?
No, I
Um,
do. I think a lot of I absolutely agree. One of the things that I had to do for the promotion of this was a podcast that was more like geared towards movies and TV.
yeah.
So they asked all of the participants to watch the miniseries
Oh
from the
yeah.
1990s. And I was watching with my husband. And while in a lot of respects it was very good, man, the women were not well represented.
Yeah.
It was like so stereotypical. You're a Madonna or whore, just no nuance there whatsoever. The men were allowed to have nuance, but the women were not. It's a real sausage fest. And it made me see that the book had been a real sausage fest. Like this, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love Stephen and I love
Hmm.
his writing and everything, but maybe in some of the earlier works, the women's perspective could have been a little more well-rounded. So I really appreciate you telling me that because honestly, as we've been doing promotions for this, I knew the story was a quiet story compared to the other kinds of horror that was going to be represented in the anthology. But I do feel like it's definitely getting overlooked because it doesn't swing for the fences, right?
But I
So
mean, to argue that though, I would say that it does because you're offering the perspective that wasn't in the stand, right? Like you were filling in that place that a lot of readers like I feel like I'm not the only one who probably were like, damn, I wish that we would have seen this perspective and we didn't with the stand. And I think the best thing that the anthology has done, honestly, was a lot of the stories I really appreciated were from the women. Like I love Sarah Langen's story. Hers was great.
yes.
Kat Valente's was great. Catriona Ward's was phenomenal. V. Castro, I wanted to go take a shower after because it was so gruesome. It was great. But I just really loved that we were getting the opportunity to, as big as the stand and as important the stand is in the world of horror fiction and just fiction in general, we're opening up the doors to say, hey, let's let some other people in and see what this looks like for y'all. And then when you get to see yourself in that, you're like, oh, this is where I fit into this. And that's a really cool thing, you know?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I really appreciate it because I don't know that a lot of people take the time to really think critically about their emotional reactions to stories. They're just enjoying the ride, right?
Yeah.
And I think if people did do this critical examination a little bit more, not to be negative or whatever, but just to have a better understanding of, oh, why does that story resonate more with me? Why does this one make me feel happier? And I know some men are probably going to be upset that I'm saying, that it's not a perspective for women, and that's fine. I mean, the book is what it is, many, many people, both genders of all genders, have enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too, but you still can't help as a woman feeling like someone's catcalling you, as you're
Yeah.
walking down the street, that you're suddenly back in the 70s. Anyway,
No, I couldn't relate more. And I think that you're very right about reading critically or like and me, like when I read, I'm like a live wire emotionally. I'm getting super emotional when I read. So, sometimes a little bit more than others. But I think, in the end, being able, with art, we're supposed to engage and like see ourselves and to share with others, and that's how you get shared experiences and communities. And like with the movement towards technology that we've been seeing, obviously it's pulling us away from that. So if there's anything that I can promote, it's being able to engage with art in this way. And it makes for such a better life experience when you know that you're not the only one going through something, you know what I mean? Like it's just really
absolutely.
nice to not feel alone. So
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I really am enjoying about horror now. I mean, it seemed like since my first horror novel came out, which was The Hunger, and that was 2018, that horror just keeps widening and widening. I say horror's a big tent, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And honestly, some of the most enjoyable stories that I've read are by women. Now, maybe that's because I am a woman, and I do enjoy that broadening of the perspective. You mentioned Sarah Langan. She's a friend of mine, and I cannot admire her writing more. And she does such an amazing job capturing what it means to be a modern woman
yeah,
in all its many horrible, horrible, horrible facets. And how optimistic we are that somehow we're going to overcome these horrible things. But it's really helpful to have someone who, like you said, sees the totality of what you're going through. See yourself represented there on the page. Yeah, it's really important.
absolutely. I think it's honestly, I think it's what makes the world go around because without community and togetherness, then you've got a lot of problems. But
Don't we though?
that's a whole other TED Talk. So, but thank you so much for answering all of my questions about Fiend and your short story in the blanking out right now. The End of the World as We Know It anthology called Make Your Own Way. You also have the essay that's coming out in Why I Love Horror with Becky, that's been edited by Becky Spratford. Is there anything else that you have coming out this year that I have missed? Because I feel like you're having a very busy 2025, and I want to make sure I'm highlighting everything that we've got going on.
Well, thank you. It has been a really busy 2025. Some stuff are coming down the road, but I also have a essay in Sadie Hartman's book,
Yes.
which is coming out in August, I think. Feral and Hysterical. Is there a better title anywhere? Um, she is such an advocate for women in horror, and she's so smart about it. So it was really an honor to be in her book. So that's coming out in August, and then Becky's book is coming out, and that whole thing is just incredible. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to
Oh
read the
yeah.
whole. Yeah.
I read the whole thing. I think Rachel Harrison's had me in tears. Stephen Graham Jones was great to close out on. I really enjoyed yours, and there was Paul Tremblay's whenever he put his daughter's drawings in. That like really touched me. That was really
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
We've got such a fun, nice community of good-hearted people in the horror world. It's just freakish. Oh, and Grady Hendrix's
Oh
essay.
yeah. Oh my
Um,
God. Yeah, that one threw me for a loop. Oh my goodness. I was reading
Look
it
at,
and actively sweating.
yeah, I looked at Grady a little funny after that, after reading that. Um, and I'm trying to think what else. Oh, yeah, there's another anthology. It's one for the Horror Writers Association.
Oh
They put
yeah.
out like one or two a year as fundraiser. It's called This Way Lies Madness.
hmm
And Dave Jeffrey and Lee Murray are the co-editors. And I think it comes out like a few days after Fiend comes out, but it's all about stories about sort of mental health.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So my story in that is a reprint. It's The Familiar's Assistant, which came out a few years ago in Dark Stars. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else this year. I wrote the bleakest Christmas story ever for an anthology. Michael Bailey and Chuck Palahniuk, whatever, the Fight Club writer.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that comes out till next year.
Oh, I'll be looking forward to that. I will be seated for that one. Well, that sounds like a very busy 2025. Are you working on anything now that you can speak about? I always ask this question with the caveat. I know that there are certain things that authors cannot talk about yet, but if you're allowed to, I of course would love to advertise what's coming down the road for you.
Well, there are two things I wish I could talk about because they're super awesome, but I can't. The only thing I can talk about is I do have a book under contract, which hopefully will be published next year, but who knows? Because it's another horror novel and it's actually about technology.
Oh,
So, the
perfect.
last third of my life, I was a technology futurist, and this is a technology I know pretty well. And it was interesting writing the story because also in some ways it's about social media in a way, and
Hmm.
it's also about deep fakes. And I know the technology really well, but let's face it, social media is a medium for young people. And I look at it very clinically as a researcher, but I've fallen off how you young people use it. So I am a little worried about it, but we'll see. But excited too. We don't have a title for it yet, so
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll stay tuned for that one, all the same, because that sounds great. But thank you so much, Alma, for answering all of my questions, all of the great discussion. Is there anything that you wanted to mention that I either forgot, didn't mention, or just you want to drop before we wrap things up?
no, you did a this has been wonderful. I've really, really enjoyed it. I love talking to you. I think I'm going to have to pick your brains a little bit more on some subjects that we didn't talk about today, but I feel like you have an interesting perspective. So thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, literally anytime. And just to remind everybody, Fiend comes out September 16th from Putnam. I highly recommend that you pre-order it if you haven't done so already, or just order it depending on when this episode comes out. You know, time is weird in the world of podcasting because we're recording now, and this will probably be going out once the book is on shelves or on publishing day. But yeah, fantastic book, and thank you so much, Alma, for your time.
Thank you. This has been immensely fun.
Thank you. Another huge thank you to Alma for her time and answering all of my questions. I'm going to be incredibly honest. This is one of the interviews that I'm most proud of, mostly just for our conversation that we have about the role of gender within horror fiction, whether it's within her book Fiend or within her short story Make Your Own Way in the Stand anthology. I just really respect Alma's opinion and what she has to say. And so being able to foster this kind of conversation just means the world to me. It's what I hope to accomplish with this podcast, and listening back to it, I feel like I was able to do that. So it's a really cool feeling for me to know that I'm doing what I'm hoping to be doing. On another note, I just want to thank in particular, like in general, women in horror. I feel like that's such a blanket statement. I feel like I know it's been generalized and kind of thrown around, but for real, at the time that I'm recording this, I'm feeling extra grateful for the uplifting voices, the feeling seen, the support. I know sometimes it can be a little bit hard and a little bit difficult to find your people, but to know that there are other people out here in this industry or in this community or, however you want to phrase it, who feel similarly to you or want to create work or art that mirrors your own feelings is really special. And if there's one thing that's happened for me this year is that I've found people that feel the same way. And this interview is a direct reflection of that. And I think it's the greatest benchmark that I have for myself to feel like this is what I've wanted to do and I am doing and I'm going to keep doing. So to be a little bit sentimental, I'm just really proud of this one and I hope that you all enjoy it as well. And to shift gears and quit being a sap for a minute, the episode that I'm going to release this week as my bonus episode will be with Mr. Jonathan Jans, talking about his release, Veil. It is a incredible sci-fi horror mashup, and just it's always the best time talking to Jonathan. He's just one of the most positive shining lights that you can talk to in the genre. So look forward to that. In the meantime, thank you all for listening, sharing, liking, reposting, etc. And until Thursday, I'll see you all then.